you for tuning in to Nathan and I's presentation on Biblical Tragic Heroes. Part 2, Adam.
Okay, so according to the Bible, Adam was the first man to ever live on earth, and Adam was given privileges and blessings to start his life. So, you go.
Yeah, so as the first man, Adam, it said that Adam was made in God's image. Not physically, but that he has choice and dominion over other things. In this case, the various animals that lived in the Garden of Eden, where he was placed. He was put in charge of it. It was the first place created on earth, and he was called to cultivate it and to take care of it. So he's given great privilege. He's the first man, and he has superior intelligence over all other animals. And so basically, he has to use that in the right way. And the right way is to obey God because he is, the moral authority. So by staying faithful, he therefore keeps his blessing. But given all this privilege, there's a potential that he could use it wrongly. And so let's see how he does that. This one, Marcia, is defiance.
So defiance is the state of being openly disobedient and determine opposition against authority. In that case, it'd be God. And because God is more powerful and he relies on all the stuff that he gives him. And then it carries a negative connection because it's defiance and not respectful for someone stray away from their roots.
So sometimes opposition and resistance against something can be good because the standing authority is oppressive, but that's not the case with what defiance means, because like I said, it carries a negative connotation. So usually it's against a good authority. And Eve was deceived by Satan. She began eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. Basically, what this represents is it was the tree in the center of the garden. That represents God's knowledge. It's a basic test. So if they eat the fruit, that means that they're trying to gain the same knowledge and wisdom that God has, but obviously they can't because they're just humans, they're his creations. So by eating the fruits, because Eve presented the fruit to Adam, he had more loyalty to his wife, so he's like, yeah, she's telling me to eat it, fine, I'll eat it. And so this is a disobedience because he was specifically commanded not to do so. After this, they try to hide from God. They think that he's not going to notice if they pretend to do their normal business, and they physically hide from God, like trees and stuff. And so they start to realize that they have done something bad. And afterwards, they are officially cast out of the Garden of Eden for their sins. You can see here that Adam was supposed to live forever, but after eating the fruit, he aged and grew old and eventually died. Here's some pictures. Here's his creation, and here's him and his wife Eve in the Garden of Eden. And so there she is presenting the fruit to him. He eats it, and they're expelled out of the forest, or out of the Garden of Eden. And now they have to live on earth. God is not going to provide anything for them because they didn't listen to his rules. Basically, they forfeited all the blessings that they were given. So here's Eve struggling to raise their children who are also disobedient like them. And over there, you can see that they're mourning the loss of their son Cain, or their son Abel, sorry. Their two eldest sons were Cain and Abel, and Abel was, God liked him because he was very faithful and presented good sacrifices. But Cain was jealous because Cain often presented vegetables and stuff that he had grown. But Abel was in charge of the sheep, and he offered the sheep to God. Another thing is that Abel's sacrifices were good out of his heart, but Cain just because he had to. So he killed his brother, and there he is lying on the ground as part of the sin of jealousy. And we'll see how jealousy can affect other characters as we move on. Basically, the lesson that we can learn is that Adam should have listened to reason and gave thought to what disobedience was going to do to him. Because unlike Adam, we should not be ignorant of the blessings that we have and resist any correction that we receive or rules that we have to follow. Because we should also see the merit in what those rules are trying to lead us to be, And we should not try to seek to be independent if we don't realize what independence is and if we're not mature enough to handle it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a trade-off. So by taking the apple, he gets the short-term gain of getting to taste the fruit, but over the long term, he loses that reliance and eats new, slow apples.
Okay, so there's a big gap between Adam and our next tragic hero. So let's just cover briefly what went in between. So basically, since Adam had committed a great sin, their children also inherited it, so they will also grow old and die. And basically, sin and violence spreads throughout the earth. You can see here, that's the Tower of Babel from Genesis 6. Basically, the people are building that as a monument to what they believe is their greatness. And so it's eventually destroyed. And then the earth becomes very violent. In the flood, God causes a great flood, which rids the earth of this evil. And Noah, right there, is chosen to protect all the animals and his family from the flood. And one thing I'd like to mention is a lot of people say, oh, no, there's no way that this guy could have just built that ark by himself. But what they neglect to mention is that the Bible actually says that he took like more than 50 years to build the ark, so he definitely could have completed it in that time. Afterwards, there's a man called Abraham, and he's a very faithful man also. And so God chooses him to basically represent him. And the picture here, you can see what he's doing is, Abraham wanted a son, but his wife was very old and could not bear a son. So God gave a son to them, but then he said, go up to this mountain and sacrifice your son to me as a test of loyalty. And so here he is, he's about to do it. He's actually about to sacrifice his son, but God did not allow this. He just wanted to see if he would actually do it. And so he proved that he was faithful enough to, and provided a lamb instead for him to sacrifice. And this is sort of like a representative, because later Jesus would sacrifice himself on this same mountain. So after Abraham does this, his descendants are blessed. They're given like great prosperity. They have a lot of food to eat. Not material wealth, but they're living good lives. Eventually, there's a famine where they live, though, so they have to move down to Egypt. And that over there, the guy in the headdress is Joseph. He was the first one of Abraham's descendants to move to Egypt, and that's his brothers staggering around him. And so they live there now because they're prosperous in that region. But after this, over time, the Egyptians become oppressive because they see that the Israelites, which they're now called, are the ones most blessed. They're saying, hey, they're too powerful. We don't have this God that they have. And eventually they're going to become like more numerous and more wealthy than we are. So they greatly oppress them, make them slaves. And so Moses is chosen to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. There he is parting the Red Sea, a very famous story. Afterwards, the Israelites are tested in the wilderness for 40 years because they eventually become, again, like disobedient, and they're not appreciative of everything that God is doing for them. So they wandered for 40 years, and eventually Joshua will conquer the land of Canaan, which is the land they were promised for Israel in the book of Joshua, which is right there. But eventually the Israelites suffer under attacks from its neighbors because all their neighbors are very jealous of them. They want this prosperous land that they were given. That right there is Samson, and he's called the judge. Basically, they didn't have a king, they had a judge, so the judge would be appointed by God, and he would like save them from tragedy. There he is. He's pushing 2 columns because he's trying to make a house collapse on a bunch of generals that were attacking them. And so basically, the state of this time is, yeah, they're in the land that they were promised, but it's very violent. And so the people, they start looking for someone that can lead them. And that person is Saul.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching the rest of the videos in this series. Thank you, and goodbye.